Welcome to Real Talk with the Town, where I sit down with the Marana staff to answer your burning questions about our beautiful community. My name is Terry Rozema, and I'm the town manager for the town, so let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Real Talk with the Town. I'm Terry Rozema, and I am here today to talk with Fausto Burruel. Fausto, go ahead and introduce yourself here a minute.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Fausto Burruel. I am the Director of Public Works and the Acting Town Engineer.
Yeah, Fausto wears a lot of hats for us. He's been on an episode with us before, and we're glad to have him back because roads seem to be on people's minds, something that they're talking about a lot, and understandably so. They use them every day, and they want to know what's going on in the town with the various road projects. We've talked in the past about Cortero and I-10, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about a specific road project, but also some general questions about road projects and how we prioritize them. But before we do that, I got a question for you. Fausto, I want to know, what is your favorite type of cactus?
Favorite type of cactus? Man, that's definitely out of the...
Yeah, out of left field, man.
Out of left field, yeah. I'm going to have to go with the saguaro. Got to go with the saguaro.
Yeah, how can you not go with the saguaro, man?
You just have to.
That's, it's iconic, right?
It's iconic. It's, tenured. It's going to be there for well after I'm gone. You just have to go with the saguaro.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. For me, it's not even close. I can tell you what's my least favorite.
Cholla?
Yeah, that's it. See, you and I are on the same page. Well, let's get into these questions here, and this is more of a sentiment, not a specific question, but kind of a more overarching question that we get from people. How do your road improvement projects work, and how do we identify what comes next?
That is a great question, Terry. It's a little bit of a mixed bag at times. We identify the need based on some existing plans that we've done over the years. Sometimes those highlight projects that we need to do, but then sometimes we hit a certain time where, development might create a need to change some of those plannings. And I think the one we're going to talk about today, which I guess I can say now, the Tangerine TI and that corridor, it wasn't something that was, I wouldn't say on our radar. I mean, it was on our radar. We understood at some point in time we would need to do improvements to that roadway. That traffic interchange would need some type of improvement. At one point in time, it was actually going to shift a little bit. There's been a lot of discussions about that. But it wasn't something that we saw a need for in the near future, if you will, going back a couple years looking forward. But now we have quite a bit of development in the area. We've always had Gladden Farms continuing, and that's been the pressing that we knew at some point we're going to have to do more improvements. But now we've seen development jump across I-10. And that's really exacerbated the issue.
When you say jump across I-10, you mean over on the east side?
I mean on the east side.
Correct. Yeah, we've got tons of stuff going on the west side, have for some time. We got some new stuff going on there with Flint Development, and now we got people have been seeing dirt move over on the east side with a project called Mandarina, and then we've got a couple of other projects that are coming online there. So, yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah, correct. We have some development projects. Even the QT that was just placed on the west side is a project that, gas stations drive traffic. And so we're seeing a lot of development near that TI that's driving the need to actually more of a pressing need to do some improvements there. So that being said, that's how when we look at some projects, we do identify, like currently we're actually working on a transportation master plan. That is something we just started. In fact, this last week we had some kickoff meetings. One of the first meetings with the communications group. So for listeners out there, we are going to do quite a bit of public outreach, and that's something that we are on the infant stages of working on that, but it'll be coming soon.
So this isn't the first time. I mean, listeners might be thinking, oh, now they're thinking about doing a transportation master plan? This isn't the first time that you guys have ever done a transportation master plan, right?
Unfortunately, it goes back a few years with the town, but we also have transportation elements as part of our general plan, which we just updated back in 2019 or 2020, just a couple years back.
2019, yep,
yeah,
exactly.
That's what I thought that date was. So that has a transportation element of it. So that helps identify, and yes, we continuously review our transportation plans. We work with our Pima Association of Governments, PAG. They do a lot of those type of planning. So we do a lot of that continuously, but this is one where the town will actually have a document that helps us further identify exactly what our needs are for the next, say, 10 years. So the upcoming 10 years will have that information. That helps drive the need for projects, helps identify needs if we didn't see any. So that's kind of sets your basis. And then, of course, funding comes into play and the need. So that's where we start to establish the hierarchy of which projects go first and how we shift those if need be. And again, getting back to the point of Tangerine wasn't identified a few years back as being a need as much as it is now because of the development and what we've seen recently.
Good. So you talked about, you mentioned Tangerine a few times, and you kind of gave us an overarching look at, how we prioritize projects. Let me ask you this, though. You didn't mention this. I didn't happen to think about it till just now. But how does the IIP come into play here, HERF funds? Can you talk about those just a little bit?
Yeah, so we're discussing when Terry mentioned the IIP means the Infrastructure Improvement Plan. That's a document that's tied to the town's impact fees. Those are impact fees is one funding source that the town can utilize to build some of these projects.
And who pays an impact fee?
Development pays for that, or a builder would pay that as they pull permits. It's part of their fee, and it's associated, it's all equalized, if you will, with an EDU. So equivalent dwelling unit, and that's all based on one single-family house.
Okay.
But
so the whole thought process behind this, and I hate to interrupt you, but I just want to make sure that our listeners are clear on what this is. So the IIP, as you indicated, is our infrastructure program plan, right? And we charge impact fees to developers, and that is consistent with the town's philosophy, the council's philosophy and ideology and direction that they've given to us, that development needs to pay for the growth as it happens. Is that accurate?
Correct. It allows us, it's another funding source, another mechanism to ensure that they pay their proportional share. Okay. So it's all being based on proportional, but yes, that is.
So whatever impact they're going to have, we identify that through various studies, and they pay their percentage based on what that study shows.
Correct.
Okay, yeah. Good. So there's some thought behind it, there's some science behind it, there's some math behind it. None of those subjects, quite frankly, that I did very well in. I'm sure that you did, being an engineer, but those weren't ones that I did very well in. So let's talk a little bit then. You know what? You didn't touch on HERF funds. HERF money helps us out with transportation too. How so?
Well, HERF funds help us out in the maintaining of our infrastructure. So HERF is Highway User Revenue Fund. People refer to it as the gas tax. It's a little bit beyond that, but yeah, you pay for that when you title your vehicle. Some of your registration fees, those fees go towards that. Maybe not title, but so that Highway User Revenue Fund is tied to your gasoline purchase, your diesel purchases. It's tied as a fixed amount. So it doesn't go up or down based on the increase or decrease of the cost of fuel. But that money is all pooled together. The state gets those revenues, and then they divvy it out to the jurisdictions based on population and things like that. Or some is just roadways, things, just different metrics. But yeah, we utilize those funds to maintain our roadways, which is something we try to puff our chest up a little bit, but we do a very good job of that, we'd like to say. We have very good roadways.
I'm just going to interject here, quite frankly, Fausto, and I'm going to say you do an outstanding job with road maintenance in the town of Marana. I think we have some of the best, most well-maintained roads in all of Pima County. In southern Arizona, I don't think anybody can match us. Oro Valley might argue with me on that one, but I'm pretty sure we can take them. So sorry to interrupt you, but you were being humble, and I want you and your crew to get the kudos that you deserve for that.
Well, I completely appreciate that, and yes, the kudos definitely needs to go to the team as they do a great job maintaining and across the board. Our CIP group plays a big role in that. Our pavement preservation team, which is a group of us that play a huge role in that. Everybody across the board has some type of input on that and really helps.
Good. So specifically, someone brought up Tangerine Road, and as you know, a big project happened a number of years ago to widen Tangerine Road, and that was done in cooperation and conjunction with Pima County and with Oro Valley. So you have this beautiful 4-lane divided roadway along Tangerine with beautiful landscape medians going essentially from Oracle Road all the way down to Dove Mountain, and then it narrows back down into 2 lanes all the way down to I-10. And people are wanting to know, so what are we going to do? Because as somebody who actually traverses those lanes of traffic almost daily, and I get down to Tangerine and I-10, the traffic backs up there because there's 1 lane eastbound, 1 lane westbound. So what's the plan, not only for Tangerine Road itself, but for the Tangerine interchange, as I'm also hearing comments from people about the amount of traffic backing up onto the freeway and all this other stuff. So talk a little bit about that.
So thanks, Terry. Great question. If I could go back a little bit, our previous discussion, our podcast, we talked about RTA and the Regional Transportation Authority and that program, voter approved. And the project you mentioned was actually part of that, and that was phase 1, and that was improving Tangerine Road from Dove Mountain all the way east to basically Oracle, as you mentioned. So it was a partnership. Town of Marana was the lead agency on that, but it went through our jurisdiction, a little bit of Pima County, and then through Oro Valley. Phase 2 is the next step that you mentioned. That fills that gap between I-10 and Dove Mountain. What the town has done is we've actually fast-forwarded a portion of that. So we're doing what we call our Phase 2A. We are actually currently, as we speak, designing that entire stretch between I-10 and Dove Mountain. However, we're probably going to build a 2.5-mile portion of it or so, just from I-10 to just east of what used to be Breakers Road. Now it's called Marana Tech Park. For those out there who are familiar with it, there's a water tank. We kind of use that as basically around the ending point of it. The reason being is there's a pretty big gap from that point as you go east to Dove Mountain. No other business activities or any connection points, if you will, beyond that. So getting that in play is huge because that will capture a lot of our projects, some of our existing developments that we have out there. And of course, we mentioned the Mandarina type projects, the residential projects that are coming into play closer to the TI. So that will capture all those. What that will look like is similar to what we built east of Dove Mountain. It will be what we call a 4-lane divided roadway. So it will have a median, 2 lanes, other facilities, multi-use path.
When you say 2 lanes eastbound, 2 lanes westbound. Total of 4 lanes and turn bays and
correct.
All of that? Okay.
Correct.
Right.
And other facilities, bike facilities, pedestrian facilities, so sidewalks, multi-use path, similar to what you see that we've constructed on the other portion.
So if people visualize or have been to Tangerine and Dove Mountain area, going all the way east to Oracle, going to look pretty similar to that?
Pretty similar to that. Yeah, pretty similar to that, exactly. Or any other roadway that's similar would be like a Twin Peaks from Dove Mountain down,
right.
Or from Tangerine, down towards I-10. So yes, a 4-lane divided is what we call it. So 2 lanes in either direction with some of those other auxiliary type of elements. Again, the bike lanes, the shared use path or the multi-use path. So that's what the roadway will look like in that stretch. There's also going to be some drainage features because we have quite a bit of drainage that goes through that area. But we will maintain a dry roadway. So it will be built to the town standards of keeping our roads dry up to the 100-year event. So for those of out there listening, that's just a storm event that we designed to ensure that our roadways are.
So why not just do it all the way, Fausto? I mean, we're going to do this portion for 2.5 miles, and we've got this segment of maybe 3-4 miles in between, 4 miles probably, close to, I don't know, roughly
about there. Yeah,
I'm just guesstimating. I don't really know, but so why not just do the whole thing?
Terry, is the answer in most parts. It's cost.
Yeah.
Again, kind of identifying the need, getting back to the hierarchy or how do we identify our projects. We do plan on doing that entire stretch. We understand that there'll be a little bit of a bottleneck or we will constrict down for a little bit. Unfortunately, that next portion to the east has some big ticket items, if you will. We have some wildlife crossing structures,
Right.
some larger drainage structures that need to be built that
Yes.
cross the roadway. When you start adding those in individually, those really substantially increase the cost of the project. There's also there will be some right-of-way that needs to be acquired, some of those things, but the big ticket items are those crossings, those things that we don't really have on the western portion, the current portion we're going to construct.
So is it safe to say that the segment that we're doing based on the studies that show the level of impact and the need right now, today?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So that kind of begs the question then. So we're going to do this, nice, beautiful 4-lane roadway, and then it's going to connect into this interchange where it's essentially, 1 lane eastbound and 1 lane westbound going underneath Tangerine and I-10. And that's been a source of, frustration or, whatever, question, concern, whatever from our community about what are we going to do with this interchange at Tangerine and I-10.
Again, great question. I've fielded some of those questions myself. So what we're currently doing is, as part of our project, we're looking at making, as part of our Tangerine Phase 2A project, while it's not technically part of the project, if you will, we're looking at concurrently reviewing.
When you say it's not part of the project, it wasn't identified in the RTA?
Correct. It wasn't
accurate?
identified in the RTA. It's a completely separate funding source. But the simple answer is yes, we are looking at the Tangerine traffic interchange and what kind of, we're calling it interim improvements we can do to help, operationally speaking, gain more throughput, gain more traffic to allow traffic to flow through there, short of building a complete new TI with an overpass over the railroad and all of those things. So what we refer to it as is similar to the Cortero Road, the abutment lane situation, where we would actually add lanes on either side of the columns or the girders, if you will, of the bridge structure and allow more traffic to flow through there. So it will be of a similar scenario to what we have, or similar condition to the Cortero TI.
Okay, so I think that's a great way to describe it. So if somebody were to go down and look at Cortero and I-10 and see, okay, this is what Cortero and I-10 looks like, if they were to come up to Tangerine and I-10 and they have that picture in their mind, they can go, roughly speaking, right? I mean, not identical, but roughly speaking, that's the kind of treatment that you plan on doing to Tangerine and I-10.
Correct.
Adding an additional lane eastbound, additional lane westbound, doing some restriping or something in the existing lanes. Talk a little bit about that.
Correct. So some of the improvements that will be done. Let's start with our westbound off-ramp. Our westbound off-ramp, we're looking at making improvements to the off-ramp as, potentially increasing the volume that can be allowed to utilize that off-ramp. As currently, we're even looking at, are we going to add an additional off-ramp or an additional lane to the off-ramp? That's something we're talking with ADOT about.
So that would be, as people are coming off, there'd be 2 lanes that actually get you off the freeway and onto the off-ramp.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's something that came up kind of late in the game, but we are currently having those discussions with ADOT as we've identified some other concerns that we see whenever we're starting to see heavy traffic, and obviously we're seeing when the railroad is through there and backs up traffic from that. But at the interchange, so at the frontage road and where the off-ramp exists, we are actually going to extend those lanes. So there's going to be an extended left turn lane, extended center lane, which allows you to go left through or right, or we're also looking at extending the right turn lane. So we're going to basically 2 to 3 times the amount of storage that's currently there right now, we're going to add to each of those lanes. So that will help with some of that, allow some traffic to stack there in those situations when a train comes through, those type of things.
Okay, as I'm kind of picturing this and you're describing it, and you're saying that's going to help, it seems to me it's going to help tremendously. I mean, that's a lot of additional capacity and stacking capacity, if you will, it would seem. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. Currently, we have just the two lanes, if you will, that allow us to, stack, and they're both approximately 150, 200 feet of storage. We're looking at adding an additional lane and extending the 3 lanes back to potentially 600 to maybe even more.
Wow.
600 to 800. Of course, there's tapering, things like
Sure.
that kind of take away. But yeah, it's going to add quite a bit more capacity than currently exists.
Great move, I think. For you and the other folks that have been working on this, I think that's a great solution, and look forward to seeing that. So talk a little bit more. What else is going on there?
So as part of the Tangerine project and that widening, obviously we are crossing over the UPRR railroad. So as part of that, there's going to be widening that crosses over that as well, which when you engage in those
How
type of discussions...
difficult is that, Fausto?
Oh, it's easy. There's no
You're pulling my leg, man. I know that's not true.
Pulling your leg a little bit, yes. We actually had a field visit. We are having good communications with them, but when you're dealing with the railroad and it has to go to their corporate offices, nothing happens fast. So we're having discussions of what that design is going to look like. There's also, when you deal with the railroad and they see an additional crossing or additional lane as potentially like an additional crossing, their initial ask is always, we need to remove 3 crossings to allow for 1 crossing. The town of Marana currently doesn't have 3 crossings to bargain with, but we do feel that there is an openness to compromise and to have those discussions. So we are having engaged discussions. The design is ongoing. We have 60% plans in for the Tangerine Road Phase 2A. The actual traffic interchange is going to lag a little bit behind that because that came on board a little bit later, but we're fine as far as the timing goes. But yeah, so one of the big hurdles is the railroad, and there's quite a bit of little nuances there that need to be figured out to understand exactly where we're going to go. There's some control structures that they have there. They're actual control boxes that there's discussions of if that needs to move or can it move, or if it can't move, then that means that we have to add an additional rail line through that area. There's a lot of issues that we need to figure out before we get too far into the design, because obviously adding another rail line could increase the cost substantially.
So when someone like me comes along who doesn't really know what they're talking about, right, and says, what's the big deal? Just put some pavement down and add a lane. It's a little more complicated than that, isn't it?
Correct, because again, UPRR controls their area and they have their right-of-way, if you will, right there that's adjacent to the TI, and our Tangerine Road goes over that area.
And when you say right away, it means it's their property. And we can't do anything on it without their permission.
Correct.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
All right.
It's their jurisdiction, and they control that, and they're part of the discussions in regards to design and what we can or can't do, or how we have to design and how we have to build. So discussions are ongoing. So, don't get me wrong, that is moving, but it's something it's an element that it takes time, and it's going to dictate some of our design and where we go with some of our design.
So let me ask you this: we're widening the road, that's one project. That's
Correct.
part of the RTA, and that's a different funding source. And then we, the town, are working with development and impact fees and a number of other ways to put together the money that's necessary to do these improvements that you're talking about. Adding the abutment lanes, moving the signal on the east side, or on the west side, I think is one of the things that we've talked about doing. All of those things, adding additional right turn lanes going onto Tucson bound I-10, et cetera. All of those improvements that we're talking about. 2 different projects. So does that mean we're going to do the one, and that one's going to be completed, and people are going to have to put it with all the construction, and once that's done and open, then we're going to start another project and then close everything down, and people are going to have to deal with construction all over again? How are you going to time that and coordinate that and orchestrate that so, to keep people happy?
Well, the good news is I'm not going to do that. Our project manager is. So.
Oh, there you go. We got somebody. We got an expert.
We got a person for that. No, we're actively. So we did add the Tangerine TI element design. All that work is part of it. So we're doing that concurrently. The plan is to impact the traveling public as least amount as possible. So we do want to do that work concurrently at the same time to basically identify where we can and, how it's all going to happen. So to answer your question, yes, we are cognizant of that. We are working on that plan and how it's all going to look. So to ensure that we're going to try to minimize the impacts. I can tell you right now there will be traveling impacts. It's part of it. But
can't get around that when there's construction.
Can't get around it.
Some level of impact, right?
Correct. And, as you know, our circulation around the town is kind of difficult. We don't have another outlet nearby. We do have the Marana TI, which, obviously has its own difficult traffic issues to contend with. But we're going to put some plans in place prior to and when we get closer to construction, so we can definitely ensure that we keep traffic moving as best as possible while we're under this construction. But I wanted to back up for a second. You brought up some good points that I hadn't got to yet, but I do appreciate you bringing them up.
I got ahead of you, didn't I?
You hadn't. You thought you did. So on the west side of that traffic interchange, yes, you mentioned, so we are actually going to physically move that traffic signal. So where it currently sits at the off-ramp, the plan is to move it back to where the previous frontage road connection is. So if you'll see, there's some barricades there. You can make out, if you looked at an aerial, you could see where the intersection was. So as part of that, we will tie in the off-ramp to those points. So that will be part of the improvements of bringing the off-ramps or the on-ramps down to that location. And also, as you mentioned, there will be dual rights to allow more traffic to make that movement. As we know, a lot of our traffic does head towards Tucson in the morning. So we need to be able to accommodate that traffic. So yeah, that is some more of the improvements that will occur once we do this project.
Will there be two right-hand turns, dual rights, coming from Oro Valley going to Phoenix bound, or is that going to be a single right?
That is going to be a single right. And again, that's getting back to our limitations of crossing the railroad. And honestly, that is still yet to be determined.
Okay.
Exactly how that's going to look, because again, when we cross the railroad, we have some limitations. So I'm 90% sure that is going to be a identified right turn lane. But again, we need to see, because we're still having some of those questions of how that width is going to look and how many lanes we're going to be able to accommodate across the railroad. So I don't want to tell you that it's going to be a dedicated right turn lane when we might end up having to make it a through right turn lane, meaning you could go through or turn right.
Gotcha.
And obviously that will impact the operations of it, but it might be something we have to do if we can't fit in a right turn lane.
Good. What's the purpose of moving the traffic light further to the west on the west side?
To accommodate more stacking, to allow more traffic to back up. And as part of
define stacking for us.
Stacking, queuing or stacking or storage, allow more storage. So when you have vehicles in a lane that back up, and in this case, that was identified, one, just it makes sense operationally to do that. And two, we understand that some of our development occurring on the west side of I-10 are some larger vehicles. We have some warehousing that are coming into play. At one point in time, there was an Amazon discussed. Now it's a Shamrock, which is not going to have nearly the same amount of traffic, but it's still going to have larger trucks utilizing that TI. So that was the decision was made that, we can definitely allow it to accommodate some of those larger vehicles. So that was part of it as well.
All right. Very good. Well, I think I've run out of questions on this. Anything that you want to add for us, Fausto, for our listeners?
Yeah, just going back to some of the discussion we've had in a previous podcast and this one, going back to the Regional Transportation Authority, RTA. As you know, we're discussing currently the RTA next. And I just want to ensure that everybody out there knows that the Tangerine TI is also one of our top asks in regards to constructing that to a full-blown interchange. We understand the need. There's only, I think in the Marana jurisdiction is where all the TIs exist that are actually have an at-grade crossing with the UPRR. So we are cognizant of that. We are working on that. That is something we have asked for. And so we are making those attempts to try to improve the situation.
Very good. Very good. Well, I appreciate all our listeners tuning in and listening to this podcast about how we identify and prioritize our traffic projects, our road projects, and specifically talking a little bit here about Tangerine Road and the I-10 interchange. Fausto, thank you so much for being here again, for answering these questions. And this has been Real Talk with the Town. I am Terry Rozema. Until next time. Submit your questions by visiting maranaaz.gov/realtalk and we'll answer them right here. To receive notifications for new releases, remember to click subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Also, please follow the town on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date on current news and events.